Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello, my name is Mickey Jo, I am obsessed with all things theatre, and I am a theatre critic based here in the UK. Today's video is not one that I ever wanted to make, both because I'm disappointed by the situation that has prompted me to need to film this video, and because it's not the kind of thing that I like to do with my YouTube channel. I like to celebrate and uplift shows that excite me, and stuff that I have enjoyed at the theatre, but at the same time, as a critic, as someone who uses this platform to review theatre, I am always honest and transparent in my opinions about things. And I haven't yet been completely honest about my feelings towards this show. I did a little bit of a live a few weeks ago, but not everyone necessarily caught that, and I have tweeted about this a fair bit, but I thought it was long overdue that I made a video here explaining why I refuse to go and see The Unfriend at the Criterion Theatre in the West End. So this is a new comedy written by Stephen Moffat, directed by Mark Gatiss, and starring, among other people, Reece Shearsmith, Amanda Abbington, and Frances Barber. It premiered last year at Chichester Festival Theatre. It has since transferred to the West End, and I was sent the usual press releases, as I would be when a show opens in London. I was not explicitly invited to review, but the way that these things work is I could have requested review tickets. They sent out an email, they disclosed when the press night was going to be, and that would have been an option that was available to me, and I decided not to do that. So to be completely clear, I did not refuse tickets to go and see this production, I just abstained from talking about it or promoting it or sharing the news of its opening. I didn't want to say anything about it whatsoever. And the reason for all of this is because of who is in the cast. So both of its female stars, Amanda Abbington, who is best known for being on Sherlock as Mary Watson, and Frances Barber, who has had a hugely illustrious career, featured once on Doctor Who, featured on various other TV and theatre projects as well. Both have regrettably become synonymous with the anti-trans movement online. Abington has apologised to a certain extent for some of the remarks that she has made, but Frances Barber certainly hasn't, and a brief glance at her Twitter feed will illuminate the extents of her opposition to the trans community. I've said it before and I will repeat again, I am a staunch ally to the entire LGBT+ community that, for me, will always include trans people. I find it disappointing that Frances Barber specifically has been cast in this production. I think it shows a tremendous lack of care towards any prospective trans members of the audience or of the crew or staff working in the theatre. And while I've heard many people talking about separating the art from the artist, I find for various reasons that it's impossible to do that in this instance, and I'm going to talk in more detail about why that is later in today's video. In any case, I have no interest in seeing this production, I do not want to promote it, and I will not be seeing it during its run. Now, I could sit here and tell you why this is such a harmful piece of casting and the impact that this has on the trans community, but I do not want to speak for that community. I want to advocate and uplift them, and so to that end I'm going to be joined in today's video by another YouTuber and another UK-based theatre critic, Ellie Talks Theatre, who is also a very good friend of mine. Ellie has her own YouTube channel that is linked in the description down below. You can go and follow her for her amazing and unique perspective on UK theatre. Especially if you enjoy my content, you're bound to like hers as well. And I'm so grateful that she was able to join me and share her thoughts about The Unfriend at the Criterion Theatre.
When am I doing the intro? When am I doing Oh My God Hey?
This is you can do it for this one if you'd like.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Give us an Oh My God Hey.
Oh My God Hey. You're gonna make it camp.
It has to be. It has to be. It has to be. We'll put that in. We'll fit it in.
I got it. Wait. Oh My God Hey.
Nice.
That's camp.
Nice. Dainty. I like it. I guess the difficult but most pressing question is just how the whole thing makes you feel. Obviously, you've got this production that, on the face of it, and I know there's a lot of talk of political correctness in the show, but from what I've read about the production, and I've read, I think, all of the reviews, I don't think it tackles LGBT themes, I don't think it talks about any of that. It's not anything that's happening on stage, it's just the people that it's platformed and the people that it's cast and their attitudes off stage that is causing this issue. And Frances Barber in particular, who uses her social media platform to propagate a certain type of divisive anti-trans rhetoric that has real world consequences. I think that's why I feel that this production is culpable in platforming her and giving her more of a reach, and I think indirectly they are facilitating and enabling all of that behaviour as well.
I mean, I think we've got to remember that it's not written by Mark Gatiss. Mark Gatiss is just the director of the show.
Yeah.
Obviously, he is a gay man, but Stephen Moffat did the writing of the show. Their casting decisions have a certain consequence to them for a lot of the potential audience. I know myself, I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. I love Doctor Who. That show was my complete and utter childhood. And when I heard about the play with being written by Stephen Moffat and directed by Mark Gatiss, like, that appealed to me because I love that show. But I can't bring myself to go and support it because I think that the casting of the show alienates people like me. And I think it creates an unsafe environment for anyone working within that theatre if you had trans members backstage or front of house. In a lot of other industries, you would have this kind of safeguarding in place. Before someone is brought in to be employed, you would look through their Twitter, you would look through their Instagram. These background checks are so important and so ingrained. It's weird to me that whether they chose to ignore it or whether they didn't look through it enough, that these comments were not seen or ignored.
I think that's such a good point about any other job and any other industry. There just wouldn't be any space for this. It just wouldn't be tolerated. And I do want to talk about who knew what, because Frances has worked with Gatiss before. She worked with Gatiss on Doctor Who and Moffat as well.
I can tell you exactly the episode as well.
I remember.
I am that obsessed. It was the Wedding of River Song. It was that whole series 6. Yes, it was Stephen Moffat's second series. I was obsessed with this show.
I don't think her feelings and her opinions about this can feasibly be unknown to everyone involved. I mean, I knew about it. I'm curious as to how aware you were before I mentioned it to you in conversation.
I knew of the comments, but I didn't know to the extent. But now that I've had to, because of conversations with you, I've looked into it now and I've seen the comments that she makes and how harmful these can be.
Yeah, because it has consequences. Like I was saying before, I think it seems to be, from an outside perspective, and you can talk more about this. I don't want you to have to go into traumatizing detail, but it seems to be just getting progressively more difficult to exist online as a trans person. I'm just seeing more and more I keep saying divisive rhetoric. It's not divisive rhetoric. It's harmful, and it's awful, some of the stuff that I see, and I don't know how you could endure that, honestly.
It's tough because you obviously don't want to ignore it, because what people are saying has a real world consequence. These comments, whether you see them as completely wrong or completely ignorant, a lot of people believe this. It's always hard because these people, you can challenge them, you can say whatever you want to them, you could, as I have before, make long videos about how something is problematic and people won't even watch the video, people won't listen to you, people won't give you the time of day because of who you are. And I think this is a problem not just on social media, but within a lot of this trans debate, is that you're not debating us, you're debating yourselves. With all of the laws that are being made in Parliament and the exclusion of trans people, as we've seen with the blocking of the latest bill from Scotland, no trans people are in the room for these debates. No trans people are being asked about this. We're seeing people debate our existence without us there. We're not being allowed to defend ourselves. We're not being asked how it affects us. And when that's going on in the background, when your rights and your laws and every protection that you have is under question, to go into your industry and to see the exact same thing, where you see productions that are telling trans stories but are leaving out trans people in roles and in the spaces on the production team, when you see shows that claim to be really inclusive of trans people and then don't dive into any of the themes or don't explore it in an interesting way, when you see so much trans work be just shoved to the side and not celebrated, it's really, really heartbreaking. It's so defeating. And we've come a long way. I think it is always important to recognise that we have made steps, that it is better, but in a lot of cases we're not pushing hard enough, and I think that's why we need to appreciate other people's voices, a lot of the other voices who are standing up for trans people in the LGBTQ community, who are constantly fighting with us.
If they're aware that people know about Frances Barber's attitudes and know about even some of the things that Amanda Abbington has said in the past, that she has since apologised for on some level, I don't think they can expect trans people to want to come to this. I don't think they can expect trans critics to feel comfortable coming to this. But I'm glad you mentioned the staff as well. I think that's something that needs to be talked about. Are they being safeguarded? And also the Sherlock fans, the Doctor Who fans who don't necessarily know about this, because I don't assume that everyone has seen their Twitter feeds and is aware of this. It doesn't get talked about as publicly as J.K. Rowling gets talked about, for example. So there may be people like yourself, like a young Doctor Who fan, who ends up at this show, maybe even goes to the stage door. What's in place to safeguard those individuals from whatever interactions might happen there?
And it scares me, because I think it's very important that these people are safeguarded. As you said, that's a great point. That's something I didn't even think about. People who might want to go and meet the cast afterwards and having potentially a horrible interaction with this person who may or may not treat them with respect or kindness.
Those are my concerns, aside from everything else. And it, on a very superficial level, it just stings that it's the Criterion. Do you feel the same way?
Yes. Oh my god. The second I learnt about these comments and the potential transphobia of these comments, I felt very scared of this theatre. I felt very unwelcome. And I think it's such a shame, because it's a theatre that I love so much. It's a space in the West End that I think allows for a lot of creativity. It's a smaller space, and these smaller spaces often get a lot of the fresher work, a lot of the things that you take a risk on. Things like plays, musicals, like Amelie there at that theatre. I went to see Amelie there because of how much I followed that musical and how much I loved it. And I know that at the moment, this is just, it's a dark mark over it. That's a Harry Potter reference, isn't it? That's probably that. Actually, do you know what, that works? It's a dark mark over, and I feel like that's something for trans people's mental health that sometimes we have to do. You know, we have to choose our battles, and we have to decide when we're going to stand up and fight or when we withdraw. We have to. There's a lot of moments where things will happen and we can fight for it and we can fight against it and nothing's going to change.
It's interesting to me as well, because I see this talked about a lot with the Harry Potter stuff, with people encouraging people not to support it financially because they can see where that money goes, and we've talked about that a lot online, just as a community. I've seen that discussed a lot. And when it comes to the Unfriend, I think this is even more direct because she's there on stage.
Yes.
And there's no way of buying tickets to this show that isn't going to support the production. There's just no way of doing that. And so I don't understand why people think they can separate their respect for the humanity of the trans community, a very visibly marginalised community right now, from their need to go and see this play. And I can already see the comments that are going to be in this comment section, which I know some of you are thinking right now, which is this whole argument about separating the art from the artist. And I know you have some thoughts about that.
Yes. I think it's so much easier to separate the art from the artist if you're not the one being targeted. I would love to be able to go and see Cursed Child. I would love to be able to go see The Unfriend. But in my mind, if I went to see it and I was sitting there and I was watching this production, on my mind the entire time would be these comments, would be what these people stand for. And I would love to be able to say, okay, I can love Harry Potter, but I just don't love J.K. Rowling. But everything that is on stage, everything that is being reflected, all of this has been soured so much because of that. We associate, no matter how much we want to, we associate Harry Potter with J.K. Rowling. Whether that is now made bigger because of her comments towards trans people and her stances on it, the hurt that comes from something like Harry Potter and something like J.K. Rowling's comments can't separate that. And as you said, it is furthered when that person is right in front of you. With a case like The Unfriend, I considered going to review it. I considered going and asking for press tickets for it and reviewing it. But I knew that in that moment and in that space, I could not do it because she is right there in front of me. There is absolutely no way you can separate her from her comments when she is right there.
And I don't think we do separate the art from the artist. And I can talk about examples the other way, where someone is so lovely a human being, you absolutely carry that fondness for people into the theatre. We see it constantly in Panto. We see it with Ian McKellen in Mother Goose. There's a reason he gets huge applause when he enters. It's not because the way he just walked on stage was so incredibly overwhelmingly entertaining. It's because you're celebrating his legacy and his career and his life. We don't do it in the positive instances either. George Takei in Allegiance, you feel the warmth of who he is as a human being in his performance in the show. And I just don't think... I can't imagine sitting in that theatre and not feeling uncomfortable because of how insidious so much of her rhetoric has been. And it's such a dedicated rhetoric. It is not an accident. It is a deliberate campaign against a specific community. That's how I feel about it, honestly.
I mean, it's exactly what you said there. I mean, so many people are going to see these shows for specific people. And I feel like the second that you learn something about an artist, it has the potential to muddy your view of them. I think there is a certain idolization of people that you don't know. And whatever reason this happens, there are people you look up to, and there are people who you love and you respect. I mean, I'll use Unfriend as an example. I admire Stephen Moffat. I admire Mark Gatiss. I admire these people who gave me my childhood, who worked on Doctor Who. And to know that their legacy right now is... I can't celebrate that because of what comes with it, because of this grey area. It's heartbreaking. I would love nothing more to be able to go and see The Unfriend. I would love nothing more to go and celebrate Stephen Moffat's writing, because I think he's such a fantastic writer.
It's not unreasonable to say the production has put you in an impossible decision as a trans theatre goer, and the production is not trying to court you. The production is disregarding the trans community entirely. And I think people are also going to talk about Gatiss being a gay man, and that in some way ought to be representative, but I think we do need to address the trans erasure, perhaps, is what I want to say, and the trans just the lack of support for the trans community, specifically from gay men, I think often.
I think it's very important to recognise that, yes, there is a lot of transphobia that comes within the community. I can give you another example from Doctor Who. There's a writer in Doctor Who called Gareth Roberts, who has said some transphobic comments in the past, and he himself is a gay man. A lot of this does come within the community.
If someone were openly racist, perhaps, or openly intolerant in some other way that society has now adapted to entirely understand is not appropriate, is not permissible, that wouldn't be condoned, I don't think, in the same way.
We have examples. Think of The Colour Purple.
Yes. Yes, gosh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. I can't remember the actress's name, but she was fired from The Colour Purple because of her homophobic comments.
Yeah, and a lot more people came out against that. People have had the opportunity to align themselves in opposition to the casting in The Unfriend and have chosen not to do so. I'm mindful of the fact as well that a lot of people were very ready to come out in criticism of a young black actress and haven't been against this older white actress who is very much sort of part of that theatre crowd. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. That was a great example. Were you surprised at all that so few of the reviews chose to mention anything about her personal affiliations, or do you think that's something that ought to have been talked about in reviews, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a hard situation, and I can understand how, from an outside perspective, you might want to ignore this, because a lot of people have the idea of separating the art from the artist, and you know, you don't want to comment on that. That's nothing to do with the play, that's nothing to do with this. You don't need to mention it. But I think it is important to recognise that a lot of people are limited on word counts when they're writing reviews. A lot of the bigger papers are limited on that. But a lot of blogs, a lot of, we see people who are just starting up reviewing, like us, like on YouTube or on their own personal blog pages. And I think if you are not limited by that word count, a little statement at the top of the review saying, this is not an endorsement of transph0bia's comments, we support trans people. That kind of support, that little thing, it's so small, it could take up 2 sentences, but that can mean a lot to us reading it. I think a lot of people bring up hollow allyship, and I think there are some very clear examples of this, but I think it is better, I think it is worth your time if you are reviewing something with someone who has made comments or has said things that may feel to trans people that you are being excluded from these spaces, that you are not welcome here, to welcome them back in, to just say, look, I don't support this, I'm going to review it in whatever way I seem fit, but know that from the get-go, I do not support these comments.
I think there's very possibly this feeling that that's the kind of thing that shouldn't be talked about in a review, but I disagree, and you make a great point about the word counts, but I think where you have the capacity to talk about it, I mean, I've talked in my reviews before about, here's a good place to sit in the theatre. I think there's a lot of things that people would like to know about a theatre-going experience that's more prescient to them than, was the comedic tone balanced appropriately? So I've put in things before about like the theatre going experience, and having now talked about this on social media, there are various people who've reached out to me and said, I was considering seeing this play, I now do not want to because I wouldn't feel comfortable doing so. Thank you for talking about this.
And I mean, I do appreciate, because I have also read some reviews, I do appreciate the people who have mentioned it. But I think that is the beauty of, you know, reviewing for yourself. I think that is the beauty of running your own blog or running your own YouTube, is that we aren't limited by these word counts. We're not limited by this. We have the ability to speak up and speak out about it. And I think if you have the space and you have the ability to, why wouldn't you mention this? Why wouldn't you show your allyship? Why wouldn't you try and make it so that you're welcoming of not just trans people, but everyone? Everyone should have the ability to go and enjoy theatre. No one should feel unsafe to have to go and see a show and know that somebody in it, or have that experience sullied for you or destroyed for you because of somebody's comments or somebody's stance. I think it lacks a certain empathy to just ignore all of this, or just to shove it all under the carpet, because this stuff is very blatant. It's seen. We are watching someone on stage who have said things. We can't separate that. It might be easier for you because you don't experience it in the same way as us, but for someone like me, I will never be able to watch this play and ignore it. So just to address it, and if people didn't know, that's more reason to do so. If you learn afterwards, do a little edit to a comment or put it at the top of a review. If you are learning about this afterwards, we have the ability to edit these things and to add on to them in spaces. I just think that we should be opening these spaces for everyone and doing our best to safeguard.
Yeah, I think you've said it all there, really. I think that was very powerful.
I'm very good at that, you know.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about it. I really appreciate hearing your perspective, and I think yours is always a very valuable and a very important perspective, and I'm very proud of you for talking about all the things that you're talking about on your channel as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you at a show soon when we can have more fun chats than the one we're having right now. So those have been my thoughts and Ellie's thoughts about this casting and this production at the Criterion Theatre. The whole thing is very disappointing, and I hope you can understand why I have decided not to see this production. I do welcome a certain amount of discussion about this production and about this casting and about the things that we've said in today's video in the comments section, but I also have no shame about moderating my comments section to ensure that it does not become a breeding ground for anti-trans rhetoric. So if you do feel like commenting on this video with any kind of anti-trans sentiment, then spare us all that and have a word with yourself instead. It's 2023, that shouldn't need to be said. Thank you very much for watching today's video.